You're doing that thing with your jaw again, Grace murmured. Nadine glanced at her. What thing? The one where you decide not to let people bother you before they've even tried. A small smile tugged at Nadine's lips. Maybe I'm just being efficient. Maybe you're your mother's daughter. Grace drifted toward an old acquaintance while Nadine accepted a glass of sparkling water and looked around for the Preservation Board representative she was supposed to meet. The laughter reached her first, not joyful, pointed. 3 elegantly dressed women stood a few feet away, their eyes lingering on her far longer than courtesy required. The one in the pale rose gown spoke to her friends in Korean, glancing at Nadine between sentences. Nadine understood enough to know she was the topic. She ignored them. Then the woman deliberately switched to English. Some events really do let anyone in these days, she said with a smile. I suppose diversity is fashionable. One woman laughed. Another shifted uncomfortably. Nadine turned. I'm sorry. Were you speaking to me? I was speaking to my friends, the woman replied smoothly. But if you heard it, perhaps it applied. Yeon, one of her friends whispered. Leave it. She's fine. Yeon looked Nadine up and down. Tell me, are you here with one of the firms, or are you catering? I'm Nadine Kalu, she answered calmly, lead architect at Kalu and Associates. I'm here to present a restoration proposal. How impressive, Yeon said, making the compliment sound like mockery. My brother's foundation is funding several projects tonight. I'll remember the competition is colorful. The women laughed. Nadine decided she wasn't worth the argument. She turned to leave. Then Yeon said, just loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The mother is the same. Look at what she's wearing. It's like they've never been to a proper event. Nadine froze. What did you just say? Yeon smiled. You heard me. Across the room, Grace had heard every word. She quietly set down her glass, walked over, stopped in front of Yeon, and slapped her. The sharp crack silenced the ballroom. Yeon clutched her burning cheek in disbelief. Nadine stepped beside her mother, looked Yeon in the eye, and smiled. Not laughing anymore, huh? Before anyone could move, the grand doors swung open. A tall man strode in with 4 security guards behind him. Yeon's eyes filled with relief. Abba, she cried, pointing at Grace. She hit me. The man looked toward Grace. Then, he froze. Before we find out why one of Korea's most feared mafia bosses just froze at the sight of an ordinary woman, take a second to like this video and subscribe if you love emotional Korean mafia romance stories. Now, let's continue. The man's voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. It can't be. He was staring at Grace. Only at Grace. Auntie Grace? Grace's breath caught. She turned fully. Stared. The man took 1 step forward. The terrifying composure cracked completely. Auntie Grace, he said again. And this time there was something young in it. Something startled and unguarded. It's me. Sion. The silence in the room shifted into something different. Stranger. Grace's hand had gone to her mouth. Sion, Grace whispered. Haejin's boy? Yes, he exhaled. Yes. Nadine stood between her mother and the Korean mafia boss while they stared at each other across 25 years, and she understood absolutely nothing about what was happening. The truth came out the very next day. Haejin Kang and Grace Kalu had been best friends at university. The kind of bond built in tiny dorm rooms over shared textbooks and borrowed coats, and the specific intimacy of being far from home in a country that did not always see you clearly. Grace had been the one steady presence in Haejin's life during her first year abroad. When Haejin married into the Kang family, wealth, power, and a darkness that only revealed itself slowly, Grace had been there. When Kang Sion was born, and Haejin was overwhelmed and frightened by her new world, Grace had come. She had held that baby. She had sung to him. She had been, in every meaningful sense, an auntie for the first 3 years of his life. And then Haejin had made the hardest choice of her young marriage. She had quietly, deliberately cut Grace out of her life. Not from cruelty, from terror. Because Grace was good and clean, and the Kang world was violent, and she could not bear to watch what it might do to her closest friend if it ever touched her. Sion had been 3 years old. He remembered a warmth he could never place, a voice that sang something soft in English, the smell of shea butter. He had not known who it belonged to until this moment. They sat down, both families, the next afternoon, in a private room at a restaurant that Sion's people had emptied and secured within an hour. Nadine sat across from him for the first time at a proper distance in proper lighting, and she noted, professionally, that he was very difficult to look at for too long. Not because he was frightening, though he might be, because his face was doing something it clearly was not accustomed to doing, which was revealing itself. The situation with Yeon, Sion said. His voice had settled back into its usual register, measured, deep, giving nothing. She will apologize formally. To both of you. What your sister said was unkind, Grace said simply. But I suspect she's learning that actions have weight. I don't need an apology. I need to understand that it won't happen again. Sion looked at his sister across the table. Yeon was quiet, her composure rebuilt but fragile. She said flatly, "It won't happen again." She said it to Grace, not to Nadine, which Nadine filed away. Present at the table, seated to Grace's left and apparently content to be everyone's favorite person in the room, was Kang Moo-jin, Sion's uncle, his late father's younger brother, the kind of man who made a room lighter by entering it. He was in his 50s, sharp in every way that mattered, and he had spent the first 10 minutes of the lunch finding out exactly how Grace took her tea and then quietly ensuring it arrived that way. "You haven't changed," he told Grace warmly. "I met you once, at the hospital, after Sion was born. You probably don't remember. The man who told 3 terrible jokes while Hae-jin was in labor," Grace said, not missing a beat. Moo-jin's face broke into a grin. "She remembers." "I remember everything," Grace said, but she was smiling. Nadine watched them. Something noted, filed. Ignored, because Sian had just slid a folder across the table and she needed to focus. "The Heritage Center project," he said. "My foundation is providing the funding. The board selected your proposal before the gala." He paused. "I want you to lead it." Nadine looked at the folder, then at him. "Is this because of our mothers?" "It's because your proposal was the strongest submission." He held her gaze steadily. "If it helps, ask the board. They voted before last night." She opened the folder. She reviewed the budget, the timeline, the scope. It was the kind of commission that architects waited years for. A full heritage restoration, significant, meaningful work. She looked up. "I'll need complete access to the original site documentation and your foundation's archived plans. You'll have it. And I work independently. I'll consult. I won't be managed." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a version of one. "Understood." She took the folder. She did not say thank you. She was fairly certain he preferred it that way. The early weeks of the project put them in the same spaces constantly. The site office, the archive room in the foundation building, the Heritage Center itself, where she would walk the bones of the old structure and he would appear, sometimes with staff, sometimes alone, watching her work with an attention that was not intrusive, but was not absent either. She got used to explaining things to him without being asked. The load-bearing implications of the East Wall, the conflict between modern code compliance and historical accuracy. He listened in a way that was rare, not waiting for his turn to speak, genuinely processing. "You argue with the building," he said once, watching her run her hand along a cracked ceiling beam. "I argue with everyone," she said without turning. "The building at least can't talk back." "Is that why you became an architect? Guaranteed last word?" She turned then, surprised. He was looking at her with that almost smile. She looked away first. Moo-jin delighted in all of it. He appeared at the project site regularly under the cover of oversight duties, though Nadine gradually understood that his actual purpose was intelligence gathering on behalf of himself. He would bring Sion coffee and then spend 20 minutes talking to Nadine about the building's history with a genuine enthusiasm that made her like him immediately. Then he would wander back to Sion, say something quietly, and Sion's jaw would tighten in the way that Nadine was learning meant he was suppressing something. "He told you something embarrassing," she said once. Sion looked at her. "Why would you assume that?" "Your jaw does a thing." A pause. "He told me I was staring." "Were you?" A longer pause. "Yes." She went back to her blueprints. She did not point out that she had noticed. She was not ready to hand him that yet. Yeon watched all of it from a distance, and what she saw worried her deeply. She was not, as people sometimes assumed, a shallow woman. She loved her brother with a fierce, genuine protectiveness that had shaped most of her adult decisions. And what she understood, with a clarity that Nadine and even Sion did not yet have access to, was that the Kang family's safety depended on a carefully negotiated alliance with the Park clan, an alliance that required Sion to eventually marry Park Soo-yeon, the eldest daughter of their primary rival turned uneasy partner. The arrangement had been in negotiation for 2 years. It was not romantic. It was architecture of a different kind. And Nadine Kalu, with her calm authority and her refusal to be impressed by anything, and the way Sion looked at her when she wasn't looking at him, was dismantling it brick by brick without even trying. Yeon told herself she was protecting the family. She may even have believed it. She began small, watching the project schedules, learning the access rhythms. When Sion, in a gesture of absolute trust that Yeon recognized as significant, granted Nadine secure digital access to his private project files and the Foundation's encrypted planning documents, Yeon understood that something had shifted into a new and dangerous phase. Her brother trusted almost no one outside his inner circle with that level of access. The fact that he had extended it to Nadine without apparent hesitation told Yeon more than any conversation she had overheard. She spent 3 weeks building her plan carefully. She cloned Nadine's access credentials during a moment of opportunity. A device left briefly unattended during a site meeting. A window of seconds that was all she needed. She sat on it, waited, watched her brother fall further without seeming to notice he was falling. The evening everything cracked open between them happened at the Heritage Center itself, late, after the crew had left. Nadine had stayed to resolve a structural concern about the West Courtyard drainage, and Sion had stayed because she was no longer pretending she didn't know why he stayed. They sat on the floor of the old reception hall with the original blueprints spread between them, and he told her something he hadn't told many people. That his father had brought him to this building when he was 7 years old. That his father had said something about the value of preserving things that generations had built together. That it was one of the last memories he had of his father being soft. Nadine listened without rushing him. "That's why you funded the restoration," she said. "Partly." He looked at the blueprints. "Partly because my mother asked. Partly because you were the best proposal." He paused. "Partly because I couldn't think of a reason not to spend more time here." She looked at him. He looked back. Sion. His name for the first time. Not as a professional address. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I just want you to know, I'm aware of what this is becoming. And I don't want to pretend otherwise." The silence that followed was the kind that meant something. She was almost ready to let herself say it. Whatever version of yes she was building toward. When her phone lit up. Then his lit up. Then the calls started. 3 of his men had been ambushed. 2 were in the hospital. Classified operational data had been intercepted by a rival gang. Timing information, routes, codes. Information that should not have left the Foundation's encrypted servers. Information that had been accessed from within the project files. By morning, the trail had been traced. The access logs showed Nadine's credentials used at 11:43 in the evening from a location that was not the Heritage Center. A data packet transferred out. The city's cultural board was notified of a potential security breach connected to the restoration contract. By noon, her contract was suspended pending investigation. By 3 in the afternoon, 2 news outlets had published pieces connecting her name to the leaked operational data, with enough implication to make her phone stop receiving calls from clients. By 5 o'clock, the Architectural Licensing Board had opened a preliminary review. She sat in her apartment and read all of it. Grace sat next to her and said nothing, which was how Nadine knew it was bad. Sion came to her building at 7 that evening. She let him in because Grace insisted, and because some part of her needed to hear it from him directly. He stood in her doorway and she saw the damage on him. The haggard quality around his eyes, the particular tension of a man who had been given evidence he did not want to accept, and had accepted it anyway, because he could not afford to be wrong. He said, "The logs show your credentials. The timing. The packet, I was here," she said. "I was home. The logs. I was here, Sion." Her voice was steady. She would not give it a tremor. "I don't know what the logs show, but I was in this apartment." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw it happen. The moment where he chose the evidence over her. The moment where the pressure of 2 hospitalized men and a catastrophic breach pulled his judgment sideways. His jaw set. "Nadine," he said, and his voice had gone cold in a way that hurt precisely because she had heard it be so different. "Maybe my sister was right. I thought you were different. I thought—" He stopped. "I can't ignore what I'm looking at." She heard the words. All of them. The specific ones. She did not slam the door. She did not cry. She stood very still until he finished, and then she said, quietly and completely clearly, "You should go." He went. She sat back down next to Grace. Grace put one hand over hers and said nothing at all for a very long time. Then she said, "We're going to fix this." "Mama, I said we're going to fix this." Grace's voice carried something ancient and immovable in it. "Go to bed. I have calls to make." Hae Jin Kang was on a flight from Jeju Island before sunrise. Nadine did not know this until Grace told her, and she did not fully understand what it meant, until the two women sat across from each other in Grace's living room, and she watched them embrace the way people do when they are recovering something they thought was permanently lost. "Your daughter," Hae-jin said to Grace, in English, because Grace's Korean was limited, and her own English was careful and precise. "My son." She shook her head once. "This family does not do anything simply." "No," Grace agreed. "It doesn't. Tell me everything. From the beginning." They laid it out. All of it. Moojin arrived within the hour, and he brought what he had been quietly assembling for 3 weeks. A ledger of inconsistencies in the project finance reports, a record of access patterns he had noticed in the foundation system that didn't align with normal project use, and the beginning of something he hadn't been able to confirm until now. He spread it on the table next to the official access logs and the timeline Hae-jin pulled from her own knowledge of her daughter's habits and behavior. "Here," Moojin said, pointing to a timestamp. "This access, 11:43. He looked at Grace. "You said she was home." "She was home. We had dinner together." "I was here until past midnight." Grace pointed to her phone. "I can show you the messages. The delivery receipt at 10:50. Her GPS was here." Hae-jin was looking at the access pattern data. Her expression was the specific stillness of a woman who has spent a lifetime studying one person's tactics from the inside. "This pattern," she said, "the way it moved through the files, accessing broadly first, then specifically." She closed her eyes briefly. "Yeon does this. When she is angry, she gathers first and then strikes. She needs to feel she has everything." "I know," Moojin said quietly. "You knew. I suspected. I needed the rest of you to see it clearly." Hae-jin stood. She was small and she was perfectly composed, and she was one of the most frightening people Nadine had ever been in a room with, and Nadine understood in that moment where Sion had gotten it. "Get my daughter on the phone," she said. "Get my son. Get them both here." The confrontation happened in the Kang family's private meeting room, the kind of space that had been used for significantly higher stakes negotiations than this one, though perhaps not ones with more personal weight. Yeon arrived first, confident, and then saw her mother standing at the head of the table. Her confidence did not disappear, but it changed register completely. Sion arrived and took in the room, his mother, Grace, Moojin, and Nadine, who had been asked to come and had almost refused before Grace told her firmly that she had every right to be present for her own exoneration. Moojin laid the evidence on the table piece by piece. The access logs with the spoofed credentials, the physical impossibility of the location data, the financial pattern inconsistencies Yeon had introduced into the project records, the cloning window, 3 weeks prior, a site meeting, a device left unattended for 4 minutes. Yeon said nothing through most of it. She was watching her mother. Hae-jin let her watch, and then she said, in Korean, quiet and devastatingly clear, "Look at me." Yeon looked. "Tell me it wasn't you." The silence stretched. Then Yeon's composure broke. Not dramatically. It didn't shatter, it softened, which was somehow worse, the way a fortress doesn't fall, but simply reveals that it was hollow at the center. "I was protecting the family," she said. Her voice was thick. "The Park Alliance, if he throws it away for her, everything we've negotiated falls apart. Everything father built." "Your father," Hae-jin said evenly, "built nothing by destroying innocent people. You put 2 of your brother's men in the hospital. You destroyed a woman's livelihood. You used your brother's trust as a weapon against someone who had done nothing to this family except be good at her work and make your brother happy." She paused. "And you humiliated her in public before any of this, because you saw her and decided she didn't belong." Another pause. "Is that what I taught you to be?" Yeon was crying now. That is not protection," Hae-jin said. "That is fear, dressed up as strategy, and I will not have it." Sion had been standing very still through all of this. He was looking at the table, and he was not moving, and Nadine could not read his expression from where she sat, which was across from him and slightly to his left. She was not trying to read it. She was looking at the evidence on the table and trying to feel something other than exhausted. Yeon was stripped of her financial access to the foundation accounts that same day. A car would take her to the airport within 48 hours. She would oversee a modest and remote overseas branch operation with no access to the family's primary business until further notice. She left the room without looking at Nadine. At the door, she stopped and looked at her brother. Something passed between them, complicated, painful, not finished. Then she left. The room cleared gradually. Mu Jin collected Grace with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been waiting for a reason to do so for quite some time, and they drifted toward the adjoining lounge with their tea and their conversation, and Jin excused herself to make calls, and then the room was Nadine and Sion and the evidence laid out between them, and the echo of everything that had happened. She waited. She was very good at waiting. "I said your sister was right," he said. He was looking at the table. "I said I thought you were different. As if the first problem was ever whether you were different." He looked up. "I knew who you were. I chose the easier thing instead of you." She looked at him steadily. "Yes, you did. I know there's no version of that I can explain away." "No," she agreed. "There isn't. I'm not going to ask for immediate forgiveness." His voice was level, but it was costing him something. She could see that clearly. "I'm going to fix what was broken. Your contract, your license review, the press." He paused. "All of it. Not so you'll forgive me. Because it's what I should have done from the moment I knew what really happened. Because you didn't deserve any of this." She looked at him for a long moment. At the honesty of it. The absence of any angle. "Okay," she said. He nodded once. It took 6 weeks. He used every thread of the influence he had spent his adult life carefully building, and he pulled it with a precision that Nadine observed from a distance and would not allow herself to be moved by prematurely. The city's cultural board received a comprehensive report with irrefutable evidence clearing her name, signed by Mu Jin and backed by the foundation's full legal team, and the contract suspension was reversed in 10 days. The Architectural Licensing Board closed its preliminary review. The news outlets, 2 of them, issued formal retractions that were specific, prominent, and legally binding, not the buried paragraphs that pass for accountability. Her clients called back. He did not accompany any of this with pressure. He did not appear at her office. He sent a brief message when each piece was resolved, not to take credit, just to inform her because she deserved to know when her life was being returned to her. He did not ask for meetings. He did not engineer proximity. She went to him. That was her choice, deliberate, made on an evening when the restoration project had reached a milestone, the East Courtyard structural repair fully completed, and she found herself standing outside the foundation building in the early dark because she had realized somewhere between the blueprints and the drive over that she was ready. He came down when his security alerted him she was there. He stood in the lobby in his shirt sleeves, which she had never seen before, and he looked at her through the glass and then came through the door. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. "The East Courtyard is done." "I know. Mu Jin sent me the report. I'm going to need continued access to the foundation files to manage the next phase." A pause. "Of course. I might also need dinner. To discuss the timeline." He went very still in exactly the same way he had gone still at the gala, except now she recognized it for what it was. Not danger. Something closer to the opposite. "Tonight?" he managed. "If you don't have anything." "I don't have anything," he said, and she heard all the things layered beneath the simple words, and she smiled for the first time in 6 weeks, in a way that felt like it actually reached her face. They walked. The Heritage Center's grand opening fell on a clear evening 3 months later, and the building was extraordinary. Nadine stood outside it and looked at what the restoration had made of the old bones. The original facade restored with period materials, the courtyard open and lit with warm light, the community rooms inside filled with people who had grown up near this building, and were now walking its renovated halls with that specific reverence people bring to places that have always belonged to them. Sion found her outside, away from the noise, and stood beside her looking at what they'd built together. "It's exactly what it should be," he said. "It is," she agreed. His hand found hers. She let it. His thumb moved once across her knuckles, and she turned to look at him and found him already looking at her, and the expression on his face was the one she had been watching him try to control for months, open and certain and entirely given over to her. "You know I love you," he said. "I know," she said. "I love you too." He exhaled like he had been holding it for a very long time. He brought her hand up and pressed his mouth to her knuckles, slow, and when he looked up at her again over her hand, his eyes were warm, in a way that made the whole complicated, damaging, extraordinary journey that had led to this exact moment feel not accidental, but inevitable. She laughed a little, quietly. "Don't make it too simple. I'm not used to this." "Neither am I." He kept her hand. "We'll figure it out." Inside, the celebration was at full warmth. She spotted Jin across the courtyard, looking at the building with unmistakable pride. She spotted her mother near a pillar at the edge of the main hall, and she was about to wave when she noticed. Grace was standing close to Mu Jin. Not accidentally close. Specifically close. His hand was at the small of her back. Her head was tilted toward him. She was laughing at something he had said, genuinely, the way she laughed only when she was completely comfortable, and he was watching her the way men watch women when they have decided something important. Nadine stopped walking. "Mama," she said, loud enough, scandalized enough. Grace turned. She looked at her daughter. She looked at Sion, standing beside her daughter, holding her daughter's hand. She looked back at Nadine. Then she turned to Mujin, slid her arm through his, and said, with the absolute certainty of a woman who has made her decision and found it good, "I spent 30 years raising her. It is my turn to be somebody's girlfriend." Mujin grinned and offered Grace his other arm like an escort at a formal event, and Grace accepted it, and they walked away together through the warm light of the courtyard, talking, laughing, already entirely in their own world. Nadine stood with her mouth slightly open. Sion was watching them go with what might have been the most genuine amusement she had ever seen on his face. He shook his head once. Then he looked at her, and his hand squeezed hers, and the laughter came out of both of them at the same moment. Real laughter, unheld, the kind that doesn't care who hears it. She leaned into his shoulder. He let her. His arm came around her. They stood together in the light of the building they had rebuilt from its bones, watching two people they loved walk away towards something new. And the evening was warm, and the music from inside was soft. And Nadine Kalu thought that some things, the very best things, don't just survive what breaks them. They become exactly what they were always supposed to be. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable Korean mafia romances every week. And tell me in the comments, who stole the show for you? Grace for that unforgettable slap? Cian for recognizing his Auntie Grace? Or Uncle Mujin for quietly winning Grace's heart? I read every comment, and I can't wait to hear your favorite moment. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next story.